Hey guys, tonight we're taking things very slow. You're about to wander, half lost and half bored, through a medieval marketplace, where nothing is quite clean, everything is for sale, and someone is probably trying to sell you something they found in a ditch. Right now, picture yourself groggy, waking to the deep clang of church bells echoing across a stone-and-thatched town still damp with morning dew. The walls of your little rented room are uneven, patched with straw and hope, and the window is more hole than glass. You stretch, kind of. Your mattress is little more than a sack of pokey hay, your blanket smells faintly of turnips, and your feet are freezing. The fire went out hours ago. Welcome to the 14th century, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake by the time we reach the fishmonger, post your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where, and when, you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You hear those bells again, long, uneven clangs calling the town awake. They come from the stone bell tower attached to the only building made to last, the church. Some say the bell was cast from stolen Viking silver, others that it cracks slightly every Lent, but still no one agrees. Historians still argue whether towns use specific bell patterns to mark types of market days or if most ringers just played it by ear. You sit up, rubbing your face, squinting through the misty morning light creeping through the warped shutter. There's already noise, hoofbeats, wheels clattering, voices calling prices no one's ready to hear. Someone yells something about onions. Somewhere, a child is sobbing. Possibly about onions. You shuffle to the door, which sticks slightly, then gives way with the sound of a small sigh and a sprinkle of splinters. Outside is cobbled stone slick with early dampness and a faint scent of burnt oats. Maybe beer. Your neighbor, a broad woman with a mole that deserves its own rent, is sweeping her step while humming a tune with too many notes. A dog trots past carrying what you hope is a fish tail. A cart rattles by so close you feel the breeze from the wheel. The driver doesn't acknowledge you, he's arguing with a goose balanced beside him like a feathered passenger with strong political opinions. Down the hill, the marketplace is already alive, even though the sun barely remembers what it's supposed to do. Flags flap lazily from posts, mostly faded, mostly torn. The square itself is more mud than shape, ringed by sagging stalls and voices hawking things you didn't know people needed. As you trudge downhill, your shoes squelch slightly, yesterday's rain has settled into the grooves between stones like a well-fed slug. The smell sharpens, smoke, dung, cheap perfume, bread, wool, and people. In medieval towns, smells are not suggestions. They're full-body experiences. Someone yells again. Something about cabbages. Loudly. You pass an alley where someone is either boiling leather or brewing regret. A man rushes out holding a bucket and muttering. You decide not to ask. And as you step into the proper edge of the market square, the world opens just a little, wide enough for stalls and chaos and more yelling, but narrow enough that everyone's elbow is your elbow now. In the distance, a town crier is reading a list of announcements, but he keeps getting interrupted by a toddler trying to eat the parchment. He slaps the child away gently, as though this is a Tuesday ritual. It might be. You've made it to the edge of the marketplace. You haven't bought anything. You haven't been robbed yet. You've avoided stepping in anything unidentifiable, for now. Progress. You step properly into the square, and immediately, everything gets louder. A donkey brays like it's auditioning for a tragedy, a vendor bangs two ladles together in rhythmic defiance of peace, and a child sprints past you yelling something about turnips and vengeance. The ground is no longer just cobblestones. It's a shifting battlefield of boot prints, wagon ruts, and puddles of uncertain depth. Your foot sinks slightly into one and releases with a quiet squelch that you try to ignore. Your other foot finds a patch of straw which immediately sticks to your boot like it's applying for the job of being your soul. As you move forward, you're nudged by elbows, baskets, and at one point, what you really hope was a rolled-up carpet. The press of humanity is everywhere, smells of unwashed linen and overripe cheese mingle in the air like enemies trapped in the same pub. Somewhere above it all, a bell tolls again. Either someone's late, or someone's dead. Possibly both. To your left, a woman balances a stack of eggs on a tray and threatens anyone who so much as breathes too hard near her. She has a voice that could cut through sandstone. One sneeze in her radius and someone's getting hexed. To your right, a man is arguing with his own cartwheel. Not replacing it. Arguing. You consider helping, but he calls it derrick and you back away slowly. Every few steps, another voice reaches your ear, best turnips in the Shire. 2 for 1 tripe pies. Genuine relics of St. Harold's sock. You're not entirely sure St. Harold had a sock, and if he did, whether it looked like that. A goose walks confidently through the mess, head high, parting the crowd like a tiny feathery baron. No one stops it. Everyone gives it space. Medieval geese are not to be trifled with. Ahead, a stall bursts into song, literally. A bard for hire strums a battered lute while making up rhyming insults about the local reeve's bald spot. The crowd is loving it. The reeve is not. You catch fragments of conversations as you pass. And then he dropped the pig into the baptismal font. But if you boil it first, the worms come out easier. No, I said walnuts, not walnuts. What even is a walnut? You try not to linger near the man selling magical cough paste in little waxy balls that look suspiciously like leftover pastry dough. The sights are relentless, wooden stalls draped in coarse cloth, cages of twitching birds, baskets of dried mushrooms, displays of hand-forged nails and oddly aggressive dolls made from corn husks. A boy runs up to you and tries to sell you a lucky rock. It is, undeniably, just a rock. It might be lucky. You hand him a coin anyway. His face lights up like he invented the wheel. Historians still argue whether such transactions were technically theft, charity, or just medieval economics doing its thing. Behind you, someone lets out a huge sneeze. You reflexively flinch, then remember, the plague was last year. Probably. You pause by a bench, if you can call 3 leaning planks a bench, and try to take it all in. The clatter of hooves, the scrape of iron, the holler of barter, the rustle of rough wool and linen against chapped skin. You feel a tug on your sleeve. A woman holding a baby stares at you, asking in a dialect so thick it may actually be underwater if you'd like to buy some thimbles. You decline. She nods like you've shared a great truth and walks on. In a corner near the well, a trio of boys toss stones at a barrel while their father attempts to sell a wheel of cheese with visible claw marks on it. A dog stares longingly at the cheese. The man glares at the dog. It's a tense standoff. You keep walking. Every step brings a new moment. A new merchant. A new minor hazard. And then, just as you start to feel slightly comfortable in the noise and flow of the morning, someone behind you yells, "Loose pig." Everyone ducks. You spin on your heel just in time to glimpse a blur of pink and panic hurtling through the crowd. The pig, squat and furious, barrels between legs and under carts like a medieval cannonball with opinions. People scatter. A chicken explodes upward in a flurry of feathers. A man drops his apples. A woman screams and holds her skirts like she's escaping a dragon. You sidestep just in time, the pig's bristles brushing your shin. Someone cheers. Someone else swears. A barrel tips. The pig vanishes down an alley with the velocity of divine punishment. Silence follows for 2 heartbeats, and then the market returns to business as usual, because in medieval towns, this is Tuesday. You shake your head, adjusting your footing, and then the smell hits you. It's coming from the fishmonger's stall, less a stall, really, and more a moist collection of crates under a sagging sailcloth. Salted herring glisten like shiny regret. Eels twitch slightly in a bucket that may or may not be alive. Slabs of smoked something lie in the sun with a quiet sense of doom. The fishmonger grins at you with the kind of tooth pattern that suggests he's lost every other one. Fresh, he announces, thumping a halibut that definitely flinches. You're not sure if it's from the impact or sheer embarrassment. Flies gather like it's a high school reunion. One particularly large one lands on a squid and gives you a judgmental look. You take a half step back. Smoked mackerel, cod tongues, haddock jerky. The fishmonger offers. He gestures to what looks like a collection of sea creatures that died of fright. Or perhaps, eel pie. He winks. You smile politely and inch away. Your nose, however, is now fully aware that it exists and has filed a formal complaint. Historians still argue whether medieval markets actually smelled this bad, or if modern noses are just spoiled by refrigeration. But if you had to bet, you'd say the anchovy heap near your foot is strong evidence in favor of historical horror. You pass a small chalkboard sign reading yesterday's fish, half off. Underlined 3 times, as if enthusiasm could redeem time. Next to the fishmonger, a child sells seashells. You are very far from the ocean. You ask her where she found them. She shrugs and says, Granny's drawer. You leave her a coin for the creativity. You continue walking, trying not to inhale too deeply. The air is a heady cocktail now, fish, sweat, ash, and a hint of lavender from someone attempting to cover it all with sachets. It is not working. A cat leaps up onto the fishmonger's stall and begins batting at a crab. The fishmonger yells, the cat hisses, the crab makes a break for it. You move on. You pass a man with a cart full of smoked kippers bundled in twine, shouting for strength. For virility. While making a series of vague hand gestures that seem to imply fish can fix your marriage. Across from him, a woman sells pickled herring in tiny pots, each with a lovingly painted lid. She offers you a sample. It wobbles. You pretend to cough and decline. Still, for all its repulsive splendor, the fish stall is a hub. People stop here. They joke, they argue over the quality of the brine, they barter wildly with exaggerated insults. A man offers his old boot and a promise to help someone move a piano that doesn't exist. The fishmonger accepts. You're not entirely sure it was a joke. Quirky fact of the day, eel was so commonly eaten in medieval Europe that it was often used as payment for rent. Imagine paying your landlord with 40 eels. Some landlords kept detailed eel logs. This is real. You are now thinking about eel rent. Behind the fish stalls, a boy with a voice still deciding whether to crack or croak is attempting to sell exotic fish oil for aches, fevers, and making your hair grow back. His demonstration involves rubbing it on a visibly bald man who looks completely unconvinced. You overhear 2 older women arguing over whether pickled lampreys gave their husbands the runs or the visions. The answer may be both. Your stomach lurches slightly. Time to move on. As you pass into the next section of the square, the smell slowly shifts. Less ocean floor, more barnyard. You inhale. You regret it. But at least the fish are behind you now. Unless they're following. You don't check. The fish stalls recede behind you like a half-remembered fever dream, and your nose tentatively begins to forgive you. Now the air carries notes of pine, fermented fruit, and fresh sawdust, plus just the tiniest hint of something fermented in someone's pocket by mistake. You find yourself approaching a ring of stalls dominated by big round barrels, coils of iron hoops, and piles of wooden staves stacked like oversized breadsticks. This is the cooper's domain, where barrels are born, butter churns are patched, and people pretend they understand how anything fits together. In the center, a burly man with a beard like mossy rope slams a mallet against a hoop, forcing it over the expanding belly of a half-formed barrel. The sound is sharp, percussive, and rhythmic. You suspect he enjoys it a little too much. Children cluster nearby, fascinated, or possibly afraid, and a young woman selling vinegar makes a comment about his fine bulging casks, which sets off a ripple of scandalized giggles among the older merchants. He pretends not to hear, though he hammers slightly harder. You pause to watch. The process is hypnotic. A staved cylinder becomes a vessel with just heat, iron, and a few well-placed curses. There's a faint smell of charring wood. The inside of the barrel has been lightly scorched to make it watertight and, conveniently, to smell like competence. A man in a dusty hood sidles up and offers to sell you pre-aged barrels at half the rot. You decline. Politely. Next to the cooper, another stall is selling wines from these very barrels, with tasting samples in tiny wooden cups. One cup is suspiciously sticky. The merchant insists the wine is imported from Burgundy. The label, however, reads Burgundy, and has a drawing of grapes that look like potatoes. You sip anyway. The wine is wet. That's the kindest thing you can say. As you stand there letting your tongue forget, a commotion erupts 2 stalls down. A tall man with a nervous expression and a very fine hat is clutching a wineskin and looking around guiltily. A vendor is yelling about missing bottles. A small crowd is forming. Then someone recognizes the man. He's the cousin of the wine thief from 3 months ago. Same hat. Same habit of looking guilty before being accused. You watch the scene unfold with mild curiosity and zero urgency. Historians still argue whether these markets had formal watchmen or if public shame was simply more effective. Judging by the intense stares and theatrical finger-pointing, you're leaning toward the latter. Meanwhile, the cooper has resumed his hammering, occasionally muttering about bloody amateurs and splinters where they don't belong. You don't ask for clarification. The area around the cooper's stall is busy. A woman is inspecting wooden buckets like she's evaluating potential suitors. 2 boys are trying to stand in a barrel and fall over dramatically. A man nearby is shouting that his cart broke a spoke and needs a half-barrel's worth of divine intervention. You edge past a crate of wooden spoons, most of them identical, all of them marked with prices that suggest inflation was invented early. You consider buying one, but you already have a spoon. Somewhere. Probably. Unless the pig took it. Across from the cooper, another artisan has laid out delicate mugs carved from horn, boasting about their ability to hold mead, milk, or moonlight. He gestures theatrically. One of the mugs leaks slightly. You decide not to ask how moonlight reacts to horn. You lean on a fence post for a moment and let the scene settle in. It's not just commerce, it's theater. The banging of tools, the shouting of deals, the clatter of wooden lids being tested like drums. Children laugh. Adults pretend not to. One elderly man offers to carve your name into a tankard, for a price, of course. You don't give him your name. Instead, you ask if he ever spells them wrong on purpose. He grins. You walk away, slowly. Quirky side note, in some towns, barrels were considered a unit of measurement for everything: ale, salted fish, even nails. One record from 1312 lists half a barrel of frogs given in rent. Historians still don't know if that was literal or metaphorical. Or worse, both. You take one last look at the cooper's corner. The bearded man is now wrestling with a stubborn hoop, his face red, his audience invested. The wine merchant is still pretending to explain import taxes to the crowd. The man with the fine hat has vanished. So has one of the barrels. You smile faintly. It's time to move on, though part of you suspects that barrel's still watching you. You shuffle onward, drawn now by a clacking, rhythmic sound like someone frantically attempting to knit the concept of thunder. The air has changed again, less like old wood and vinegar, more like wool, damp laundry, and a whisper of heated argument. You've arrived at the Textile Row, where looms chatter, spindles spin, and no one agrees on the proper use of goat hair. The stalls here are covered in fabric, bolts of linen dyed unevenly, scraps of wool in shades ranging from wet sheep to aristocrats' brews, and more lace than seems strictly necessary for a population that only bathes monthly. The moment you step into this lane, a woman shouts, "You there! Feel this!" and thrusts a swatch of cloth into your hand. It is both coarser and warmer than expected. Local wool. She beams. From a Suffolk you with only one bad leg. You nod, pretending this is a useful measurement of quality. Behind her, a spinning wheel turns hypnotically as an old woman feeds raw wool through it with fingers that look carved from bone and determination. Her eyes are sharp. She says nothing. She's probably judging your sleeves. Just past her stall, two women are mid-argument, voices rising above the looms chatter like badly tuned lutes. I told you it was Cotswold wool. It smells like Swaledale. You wouldn't know Swaledale if it bit your ankle again. You linger a moment, not just because it's entertaining, but because one of them is now brandishing a half-woven sock like a weapon. Historians still argue whether medieval people took their sheep breeds this seriously or if modern reenactors just have a lot of time. Across the lane, a man is touting imported lace. He claims it's from Bruges. You inspect it. It might be from a tablecloth. You nod appreciatively and move on before he tries to sell you a matching hat. You pass a line of scarves fluttering like sleepy banners, and a small child playing peekaboo with a bolt of dyed linen. His mother yells something about dye stains and goats, but the child is now pretending to be a wizard. A weaver with a face like folded parchment shows you a complex pattern he's replicating from a noblewoman's pillow. It depicts two rabbits jousting. You ask if it's based on anything real. He shrugs. Nobles get bored. Quirky note, medieval manuscripts are full of weird marginalia, rabbits with swords, snails fighting knights, and ducks playing bagpipes. Historians still debate whether these were inside jokes, lost symbolism, or scribes slowly losing their minds on ink fumes. A small loom rattles beside you as a teenage girl works at it furiously, her tongue sticking out in concentration. She's weaving a repeating pattern of geometric roses in faded blue and brick red. You ask her how long it takes to finish one. She sighs and says, I started this before my brother could read. You nod solemnly. Behind her, a man wearing too much velvet is complaining loudly that the wool here lacks dignity. A merchant counters that his doublet lacks structural integrity. You move quickly past before their debate becomes tactile. Next up, dye pots. Big bubbling cauldrons emitting thick steam and the aroma of wet herbs, vinegar, and regret. A dyer shows you how madder root creates a rich red. His hands are stained crimson and he insists that's not from anything recent. Nearby, a younger dyer is experimenting with woad, a plant that turns cloth a bluish gray that screams surf but fashionable. He waves at you, holding a soggy tunic on a stick, as if showing off a fish. At one point, you pass a stall where a woman is selling miracle thread. She claims it was blessed by a monk who once sneezed on a relic. She's charging triple. Someone is buying it. The wool stalls continue on, some boasting fleece still faintly damp from the sheep. One man is spinning directly from a bundle balanced on his knees while arguing with a bystander about the ethics of sheep haircuts. You duck under a line of drying cloth and find yourself standing beside a man with a full beard of dyed wool. He claims it's for advertising. You silently admire the commitment. By now, your fingers are covered in stray fibers, and you've somehow acquired a small tuft of purple fuzz in your pocket. It may have snuck in. You pause to look around. The Textile Row is humming with movement. Threads, color, calluses. Wool debates rage, children run in scarves too long for their legs, and everywhere, the thrum of making continues. And just as you start to wonder if anyone here wears cotton, someone behind you mutters, foreign nonsense, and sneezes into a wool mitten. Your journey through the textile labyrinth ends in a swirl of lint and opinion. You give your tunic a quick shake, just in case any experimental dyes decided to come home with you, and step into the next slice of market chaos. Instantly, your nose registers the change. It's sweet at first. Intriguing. Honeyed almonds, baked figs, maybe even cinnamon, then it twists sharply into something sharper, pepper, vinegar, and something you suspect is technically a mineral. Welcome to the spice and sweets quarter, where every jar glows, every cellar has a secret recipe, and half the goods are probably lies. Before you, a neat row of tables is lined with tightly sealed jars, small barrels, folded cloth sachets, and tiny pyramids of color, brick red powders, glowing yellow dust, flecks of dried green, and something shockingly blue. You doubt the blue is edible. You're also certain someone will eat it anyway. A mustached man with the air of a traveling magician beckons to you with a flourish. Saffron, he says reverently, lifting a small vial no longer than your finger. Genuine. Persian. Harvested by moonlight. Blessed by monks. You peer inside. It's orange. Very orange. He opens the jar with the seriousness of a priest revealing holy relics. The smell hits you, sharp, musky, heady. Not unpleasant. Not quite real. You raise an eyebrow. That's saffron. He winks. Or marigold petals dipped in clove oil. Depends who's asking. Historians still argue whether most medieval saffron was real or if local merchants perfected the art of placebo luxury. Given the man's wink, you suspect the latter. He offers you a friend price. You don't ask what he charges enemies. Next door, a stall is selling spiced wine in tiny glazed mugs. For warmth. For charm. For digestion. Cries the seller, sloshing something that smells of rosemary and questionable choices. You accept a sample. It burns gently going down. The taste lingers like a whispered dare. Nearby, a child with sticky fingers offers candied nuts from a wooden tray, while her older brother sells sugar petals made of flattened honey and rosewater. They are melting slightly in the sun and one has already fused to the tray. You buy two. One for taste. One to see if it peels off. The sweet stall is a masterpiece of medieval temptation, glazed fruits gleaming like polished gems, sesame seed treats that clump together in delicious rebellion, and fig paste rolled into tiny spirals that look like they might grant visions. You nibble one. It mostly tastes like yesterday. A merchant behind the stall explains that sugar is a luxury, still imported at great expense, sometimes traded for cloth, sometimes for promises. He adds, with a straight face, that a noble once paid for a boat with a jar of candied lemon peel. You suspect embellishment, but you nod politely. To your left, a short woman with remarkable eyebrows is offering spice blends for every purpose, stew mixes, love elixirs, cold remedies, and something she describes as nose revenge. She lets you smell a tiny cloth pouch. You sneeze so violently she hands you a second pouch as a courtesy. Quirky fact, medieval spice blends sometimes included ground coral, ambergris, or even powdered emerald, mostly for humor balancing, but occasionally to impress guests too polite to ask why their soup sparkled. You wonder briefly how much accidental alchemy happened at dinner parties. At the end of the row, a stall is devoted entirely to vinegar, apple, berry, malt, and one labeled only as surprise. The merchant offers you a taste. You decline. He nods with respect. 2 stalls down, a pair of women are debating loudly over cinnamon quality. I know what true cinnamon tastes like. Then why do your pies taste like shoe bark? You pass by with care. On the ground near your feet, a cat licks up what's either a syrup spill or a potion. It seems unbothered. Possibly immortal. Just as you're preparing to move on, a vendor waves you over, offering a cloth-wrapped package. Special deal, he says. Ginger, clove, pepper, mustard seed, blended fresh. Good for meats. Or enemies. You take a whiff. It clears your sinuses, polishes your soul, and momentarily disconnects your ability to blink. You smile, pay him, and promise to use it responsibly. The spice quarter buzzes with energy, sense, and soft lies. It's warm, noisy, oddly seductive, and just confusing enough to make you second-guess your sense of taste. Or history. Or reality. You turn toward the next section of the market as someone behind you loudly declares. I swear it was real saffron this time. Sure it was. You stagger slightly as you leave the spice row, still blinking the last of the mustard seed vapor out of your eyes. Your tongue feels like it's reconsidering its career choices. Fortunately, the next lane appears, at first glance, to offer a reprieve. You spot a bench. More precisely, a plank of wood balanced on two overturned crates. But in a medieval market, this qualifies as 5-star seating. You sink onto it with the reverence of a worn-out pilgrim. Around you, bread. So much bread. Stalls bristle with loaves, rolls, rounds, and flatbreads, all proudly displayed on reed mats or stacked in little leaning towers. The smell is divine, yeasty, warm, slightly burnt. It wraps around your head like a friendly cloud. A woman with forearms like battering rams is slapping down rounds of rye that could double as shields. She gestures at one proudly. Made this one during a thunderstorm, she says. You nod like that means something. You pick up a small, square loaf and give it an experimental sniff. It smells like effort. You take a bite. It's dense. Not in the way cake is dense. In the way stone is dense. It fights your teeth, then gives in grudgingly. You chew. You wait. It finally swallows. You are both changed by the experience. Someone next to you murmurs, that's yesterday's batch. You raise your eyebrows. She adds, today's is harder. To your right, a thin man in a flour-dusted cap is slicing long loaves with a knife so dull it's more of a suggestion. He sells barley bread, oat bread, something he calls monk crust, and a strange blue-tinged bun he says is from a town where the well runs oddly. You ask what's in the monk crust. He shrugs. Monks? Quirky fact, in many medieval towns, bakers were regulated by strict guild laws, loaves had to be a certain weight, or the baker risked public shaming in the stocks. One London baker in 1266 was caught selling underweight bread and sentenced to be paraded through town with his loaves tied around his neck. You look down at your benchmade sandwich. It probably meets regulation, barely. A child offers you something round and suspiciously smooth. Cheese roll, she says. You ask what kind of cheese. Mostly, she replies. You hand her a coin and eat it. It's chewy. Sweet. Slightly confusing. You pretend to enjoy it. Behind the bread stalls, you spot a small oven built into a stone cart. A portable bakery. A young couple is baking flatbread directly on its hot stone, flipping rounds with practiced ease while singing a duet about wheat. Their voices are lovely. The bread is burnt. You clap anyway. A few steps away, a stall specializes in festival loaves, decorated with nuts, dried berries, little flower roses pressed into the top. They look too beautiful to eat, and judging by the texture, they might also be too hard to eat. One has been carved into the shape of St. Cuthbert's foot. You ask why. The seller says, why not? You buy it out of respect. Further on, you spot a no-yeast stall. The merchant insists their loaves are blessed to rise naturally, possibly from pure moral superiority. You sniff one. It smells like bark and optimism. You politely decline. Next to them, someone is selling bread bowls filled with something gray and steaming. The sign reads, porridge pie, both spoons included. You're tempted, until a passing monk mutters, may God preserve your stomach. You take that as divine advice. At the edge of the bread zone, a brawl is gently beginning. A woman is waving a baguette like a weapon, shouting, he knew I wanted the walnut roll. Her target, an elderly man holding a suspiciously walnut-looking roll, pretends to be deaf. A baker in the background sighs and starts baking more. Slowly. On purpose. You return to your bench. A pigeon sits beside you, eyeing your crust. You toss it a bit. It pecks, nods, and waddles off with approval. Congratulations, you've made a friend. Historians still argue whether pigeons were truly respected in medieval towns or simply tolerated like feathered tax collectors. Either way, this one approves of your snack. You sit in silence for a moment, listening. Cracking crusts, soft laughter, the slap of dough on stone. The world narrows to flour, warmth, and crumbs. And then someone yells, "Who sold me a loaf with a tooth in it?" You stand up. Time to keep walking. You rise from the bench, brushing crumbs from your lap, though they mostly stick, forming a breadcrumb constellation no one asked for. Your knees crack gently in protest. You stretch. You turn. And immediately you regret it. The clang of iron on iron slices through the relative calm. A deep, rhythmic pounding that vibrates in your chest and elbows. Ahead, the blacksmiths. They don't even have a proper stall. Just a broad wooden awning, an anvil, a forge blazing like someone picked a fight with the sun, and tools scattered with the careful chaos of practiced work. Sparks jump into the air like drunk fireflies. Heat radiates out in waves. The blacksmith, a mountain of a man in a leather apron held together by soot and willpower, brings his hammer down again. Clang. The red-hot shape on the anvil spits a bit. You jump slightly. He doesn't notice. Around him, a modest display, cauldrons, fire pokers, nails, buckles, pans, and, bizarrely, a pair of tongs shaped like ducks. A child pokes them cautiously. The duck tongs do not quack. Disappointment is palpable. You lean in to admire a finely made iron pot. Before you can touch it, a voice from the side snaps, "That's not one of his." You turn. Another blacksmith, leaner, younger, with a dramatic braid and a scowl so sharp it could open oysters, is standing beside her own setup, just a few feet away. Her forge is smaller, but her display is neater. Her pans gleam with pride and vinegar polish. He overtempers, she mutters. Makes everything brittle. Ask him about last year's frying pans. Go on. You do not ask. Historians still argue whether competition among market artisans was this aggressive or if modern retellings just enjoy the drama. But given the death glare currently being exchanged over a pile of iron ladles, you suspect this tension is older than fire. You examine a belt buckle that's been hammered into the shape of a fish. For fishermen, the woman explains. Or people who want to be slippery. A few stalls down, a man is attempting to sell cast-off blacksmith scraps as protective charms. He holds up a bent nail and tells a passing monk it wards off taxes. The monk scoffs, but still buys it. Behind the main blacksmiths, a boy is pumping bellows with the energy of someone being paid in bread crusts. He pauses long enough to scratch his nose, then resumes, completely unfazed by the proximity of molten metal and authority figures. You pass a table laid out with knives. None are especially large, but each has a purpose: paring, boning, eating, carving runes into cheese. The smith behind the table grins at you. "That one's for cutting disappointment out of stew," he says. You nearly buy it on principle. The clang of metal continues as the larger smith tests a new horseshoe by casually tossing it on the ground and stomping on it. It survives. The ground does not. You linger at a corner where a more elderly smith is selling only hinges and keys. "Romantic," he says, when you ask why. Doors. Locks. The moments before something opens. Then he shrugs and adds, "Also, they sell." You pick up a key that feels far too heavy for anything useful. He says, "That one opens a church. Or a chest. Or a very dramatic story." You put it back gently. Behind you, the blacksmiths continue their quiet war. The younger one is now polishing a skillet with so much passive aggression, the skillet itself seems uncomfortable. A passerby asks the larger smith if he makes wedding rings. He points at a horseshoe and says, "Only for people who expect bad luck." The crowd laughs. His rival sneers. Quirky fact, some blacksmiths in medieval towns doubled as informal dentists, using pliers to remove teeth. They also sometimes served as unofficial veterinarians and, in one German town, wedding officiants. Because when you work with fire, people just assume you know what you're doing. As you begin to walk away, a final clang rings out behind you. Not from the forge, but from a toddler who's picked up a ladle and is whacking a pan like it owes him money. His mother tries to stop him. The smiths silently approve. You exit the blacksmith row a little sweatier, a little dazed, ears still ringing faintly. You've learned two things. Never stand too close to a forge. Passive aggression is an art form that transcends centuries. You step back into the main market thoroughfare, and something gently squishes underfoot. It's either mud, or the next story. You lift your foot slowly, bracing for the worst. It's mud. Probably. There's a suspicious glisten to it, but in a medieval market, suspicious glisten is just part of the decor. You scrape your boot against a rock, take a deep breath, instantly regret that, and forge ahead, directly into a cloud of unfamiliar smells. Earthy. Green. Slightly, slug-like. You've entered the herbwife's domain. Her stall is part apothecary, part vegetable patch, part chaotic hedge. Bundles of dried leaves dangle from a rope overhead, brushing your head like slightly accusatory whispers. Jars and bowls are arranged across the table in a display that suggests both careful thought and zero concern for alphabetical order. The woman behind the stall looks exactly like what you'd imagine, wild silver hair escaping a linen cap, fingers stained green and purple, expression somewhere between motherly and mildly haunted. She greets you with a croaky "You look inflamed." You try to thank her. She cuts you off, feet hurt. Joints sore. Bad dreams. Yes. You nod automatically. She's not wrong. Without asking, she plucks a glob from a bowl and smears it on your wrist. It smells of mint, vinegar, and something faintly amphibian. For balance, she says. And bunions. Same principle. You smile nervously and try not to sneeze. Next to her, rows of smaller bowls hold assorted mystery goops and pastes. A small sign declares: cures, coughs, warts, jealousy, and uncooperative in-laws. You ask about the last one. She winks. That one's mostly butter and cayenne. Historians still argue whether medieval herbalists were actual medical professionals, local therapists, or just very convincing improvisers. Based on this woman's intensity, you're leaning toward all of the above. A younger assistant, possibly her granddaughter or a kidnapped fairy, offers you a sample of eye-cleansing salve. You politely decline. She shrugs and tries it on herself. Her left eye starts watering. She looks thrilled. The herb wife waves a bundle of dried lavender in your direction. This one's for sleep. This one's for mice. Same bundle, different incantation. You ask which incantation she uses more often. Sleep, she says grimly. Mice don't listen. To your right, another table displays strange objects, thistles wrapped in twine, beetles in wax, a chicken foot that may or may not be decorative. A traveling friar eyes the chicken foot, crosses himself, and scuttles away. A passing merchant stops to buy a jar labeled for marital harmony. You lift an eyebrow. He shrugs. It's cheaper than a new roof. She sells it to him with a smile and a sachet of something that smells strongly of rosemary and possible disappointment. Quirky fact, many herb wives based their remedies on the ancient theory of humors, bodily fluids that needed balancing through diet, bleeding, or just good old-fashioned nettle tea. For melancholy, dried rose petals and a warm goat. For anger, cold baths and fewer onions. For foot pain, heated snail jelly. Yes, snail jelly. You pass a shelf of tinctures with delightfully ambiguous labels: courage, mild honesty, Waking gently. You consider buying one, but your coin purse has already suffered through spices, mystery bread, and half a wheel of saint-shaped cheese. At the edge of the stall, a small chalkboard offers brief consultations, 2 pennies for your mood, 1 extra if it's complex. A man is already seated, describing a dream about falling into a hole filled with dancing turnips. The herb wife nods solemnly and hands him a jar labeled grounding salt. He looks relieved. You walk away slowly. Behind you, a chicken, not connected to any part of the stall, sits inside a basket, staring at you with the kind of judgment only chickens can muster. It blinks once. You feel deeply unworthy. The air thickens again, less of mint and myrrh now, more of smoke and vague suspicion. You step out of the herb lane, wrist still tingling faintly from the ointment, wondering whether it's actually working or if you've just been hexed in a really helpful way. A bell tolls far off in the distance. Someone coughs behind you, then sneezes, then mutters something about frogs. The herb wife cackles. You continue walking, wondering what else the market has in store, and whether you're now officially 3% snail. You leave the herb wife behind, though her scent lingers in your clothes like a stubborn ghost. Your wrist still glistens faintly, smelling of something between mint and marshland. You press on, weaving through a narrow path that seems darker, quieter, and oddly deserted. Then it hits you. Not metaphorically. The smell. It creeps up your nose, curls around your brain, and launches a full assault on your will to live. It's rot, soaked leather, mold, and something sharp and almost philosophical. It smells like regret. And also feet. This can mean only one thing: you found the tanner's corner. There are no bright banners here, no cheerful shouting, no musicians strumming love ballads about turnips. Just a few hunched figures moving between vats of thick brown liquid, stretching hides on wooden racks, and occasionally muttering as if communing with forgotten gods. You've stumbled into the quietest, smelliest corner of the market, and now you must live here. For a few minutes. A man in a wide apron nods as you approach. Careful, he says, gesturing toward a puddle. You look down. The puddle is breathing. You sidestep. The stall consists of little more than racks of skins: goat, pig, sheep, deer, draped like floppy ghosts drying their hair. The air is dense. Humid. You could bottle it and use it to clear sinuses or strip wallpaper. One table holds bundles of half-processed hides. A sign says, soft enough for babies. Strong enough for boots. You resist asking what kind of baby they tested that on. The tanner hands you a strip of leather to feel. It's warm. Slightly damp. Surprisingly supple. Also, you may never get the smell off your hand. Historians still argue whether medieval tanning was the worst job in town or simply the one that required the least social interaction. Given the way everyone gives this section a wide berth, you suspect it's both. You watch the process for a moment. One man is scraping hair off a hide with the intense focus of someone trying to erase a memory. Another is stirring a vat with a stick that looks like it once had dreams. A teenager nearby is holding a bucket and looking deeply betrayed by every life choice that led to this moment. He's ankle deep in what you hope is water. It is not water. Quirky fact: traditional tanning methods used urine and fermented animal brains to soften hides. Some formulas also included lime, dung, and pigeon droppings. You're pretty sure every single one of those ingredients is present in the air right now. Welcome to Skincare, 1350s edition. Someone nearby pulls a wet hide from a vat with a squelch that deserves its own warning label. You back away gently, trying not to gag. The tanner doesn't seem to notice. Or perhaps he's immune. To your left, a small display of finished goods, belts, pouches, a few pairs of gloves, and one absolutely enormous boot. Custom, the tanner explains. For a man with expectations. You don't ask. Behind you, a small child tugs at your tunic and offers to sell you a leather mouse. It's a lump of stitched hide with 2 button eyes. It's horrible. You buy it immediately. You spot a woman across the path examining a pair of gloves like she's negotiating a peace treaty. The tanner offers a second pair. She sniffs them. He shrugs. "That's the good kind of smell," he says. She seems unconvinced. A couple passes through, holding perfumed kerchiefs to their faces. The woman looks like she might weep. The man mutters, "It builds character," while visibly failing to breathe. One poor soul, a scribe by the look of his ink-stained sleeves, gags audibly and stumbles into a barrel. The tanner helps him up, offers him a water skin, and casually says, "It's just the morning batch." The scribe turns green. You start to feel dizzy. Not from fumes, you tell yourself. Just, from appreciation of the craft. And mild brain cell loss. You begin backing away, slowly, carefully, trying not to inhale. The tanner gives you a friendly wave. He seems genuinely nice. You suspect that's how he traps people into conversations about hide curing. As you escape the tanner's district, the air clears just slightly. Your lungs remember their purpose. Your eyes stop watering. You feel altered. Like someone who's seen things. Smelled things. Survived things. You glance at your little leather mouse. You name it regret. And then, in the distance, you hear music. Which, in this context, is both promising and ominous. You follow the music, not because it's good, you're not sure it is, but because it's not the smell of tanned regret, and that's enough. The tune bounces through the air in lopsided rhythm, pipes trilling slightly out of tune, a tambourine played with either great enthusiasm or deep vengeance, and a drumbeat that may, in fact, be someone hitting a barrel with a spoon. You round the corner and stumble into a clearing of energy, movement, and noise, the performer's square. In the middle, a trio of acrobats tumble in and out of formation, one leaps over a barrel, the next spins on his hands, and the third flings a juggling pin into the crowd by accident. A child screams with joy. A man narrowly avoids losing his hat. The crowd claps, whistles, and occasionally throws small coins, or, in one case, a potato. The acrobats recover gracefully, bowing as if the thrown root vegetable was part of the routine. The shortest of the three does a cartwheel and flips straight into a handstand, holding the pose just long enough to make you question your own spine. To one side, a juggler with an untrustworthy smile is juggling apples, spoons, and what might be a stuffed squirrel. Every now and then, he stops to shout, "Pick a number." To no one in particular. Behind him, a one-man band wobbles on a makeshift stool, balancing drum pedals, a flute in his nose, yes, his nose, and cymbals tied to his knees. The sound he produces could be described as bold. Then, you spot the bear. It's not performing. Not yet. It sits on its haunches near a wooden post, loosely chained, looking grumpy and vaguely philosophical. Its handler, a thin man with too many teeth, calls to it sweetly while rattling a tambourine. The bear sighs. Children inch closer. Parents do not. The man calls again. The bear gets up. Sort of. It lumbers, sways, and raises one paw in a gesture that might be a wave or a threat. The crowd claps. The bear yawns. You edge slightly away. You've read enough ballads to know how this ends. Historians still argue whether performing bears were truly trained or just very tired. This one appears to be both. It moves through a few tired tricks, standing, sitting, pretending to dance, while its handler sings a song with suspiciously rewritten lyrics about tax collectors. A young woman near you mutters, "That bear has a better life than I do." You nod. The bear, at least, gets clapped for napping. Quirky fact, medieval markets often hosted traveling entertainers, jesters, musicians, animal acts, puppet plays. Some were licensed. Most were not. One infamous troupe in France was banned after their pig act caused a minor riot. You briefly glance around for pigs. The acrobats have now recruited a child from the crowd. They give him a wooden sword and tell him he's a knight. He immediately hits one of them in the knee. The audience roars. The acrobat bows with exaggerated pain. The child curtsies, clearly confused. Over by the edge of the square, a woman is doing something that might be fortune-telling or just really animated gossip. She holds a small mirror, a goose feather, and a walnut. Her customer looks terrified and delighted. To your right, a puppet show begins. Two rough cloth puppets, one knight, one dragon, battle noisily atop a makeshift stage. The dragon is winning. A small boy yells, "Bite him again." The puppeteer gives the dragon a sock puppet grin. The knight collapses dramatically. The crowd claps. The boy is overjoyed. The bear, having fulfilled its daily union requirement, lies back down with a grunt and begins gnawing lazily on a stick. It's unclear if this is entertainment or dinner. The handler bows again, louder than necessary. A man passes you wearing a hat made entirely of bells. He's either a jester or very confident. He twirls once, jingles ominously, and disappears into the crowd. Someone hands you a cup of something warm and frothy. You thank them before realizing you have no idea what it is. You sip. It tastes like mead, thyme, and accidental cinnamon. You approve. You watch the crowd for a few moments longer, the way people lean in to watch a juggler drop something, the way kids mimic the tumblers, the way the bear seems to be eavesdropping on everything. It's all noise and color and slightly dangerous joy. And then, just as you're about to leave, the juggler drops the stuffed squirrel. The crowd gasps. The bear looks up. Time to go. You make your escape at a brisk but dignified pace, the kind of walk that says, "I'm definitely not fleeing a bear with performance anxiety." You blend into the next crowd cluster, relieved to find yourself surrounded not by fur or feathers, but candles, cords, bells, and cheese? Yes. Cheese. You've wandered into a row of ecclesiastical goods and semi-related oddities, presided over by churchmen, apprentices, and merchants who look like they may have once attended a theology lecture but left early to chase someone's goose. Immediately, you're struck by the mingling aromas of beeswax, incense, and dairy. An oddly spiritual combo. A tall monk in a soot-smeared robe gestures to a table of fat wax candles, some plain, some carved into little saints with hopeful expressions. "Long burning," he says. "Good for vigils, meditations, or nights when the latrine door won't stay shut." Next to him, a boy is trying to weigh a goose using a set of brass scales meant for measuring communion wafers. The goose is not cooperating. Neither is gravity. The boy sighs and writes something in a tiny ledger. A friar beside them is defending the honor of his monastery's cheese to a suspiciously well-dressed cheese merchant. "It's aged in peace, blessed twice, and stored above the crypts," he insists, holding out a lumpy round wrapped in linen. The merchant sniffs it and says, "Smells like St. Wilfrid's toe." They do not agree on whether this is a compliment. You edge toward a quieter table stacked with prayer beads and bells. The bells are small, delicate, and suspiciously overpriced. The seller, a man with ink-stained fingers, claims they've all been rung inside a real church. Possibly during a real ceremony. Possibly just near one. You pick up a bell and ring it gently. It tinkles like a mouse in a tin bucket. A nearby nun flinches. You put it down. The merchant offers you a discount if you also buy one of his parchment charms, tiny folded slips of Latin prayers, sealed with wax and pressed under a saint medallion. "They ward off nightmares," he says. "And bad neighbors." You consider buying 5. Historians still argue whether charms like these were genuine expressions of faith or just medieval insurance policies with better marketing. Some charms were worn in shoes, sewn into hats, or buried beneath garden gnomes, or their 14th century equivalents. Either way, the wax seal is very satisfying to touch. You notice a side table bearing relics. You say relics because one is clearly a dog tooth glued to a nail, and another is labeled hair of Saint Agnes, possibly a goat. The merchant shrugs and says, faith fills in the gaps. To your left, a woman is hawking linen altar cloths while simultaneously haggling over the price of dried rosemary. She claims both are essential for divine communication. You're not sure who to believe anymore. At a bench near the well, two elderly men are deep in a theological debate that has apparently pivoted to cheese. One of them is holding a very small wheel and making sweeping gestures. The other is chewing thoughtfully and shaking his head. You catch snippets. If God made all things, then even curdling must be holy. But what if the mold is sentient? You decide to give them space. Just beyond the church goods, another vendor is selling brass weights, round, square, even one shaped like a dove, used for market scales. He taps one and says, certified in 1327. Reliable ever since. You nod respectfully. Quirky fact, market weights were so important that towns sometimes chained them to public squares to prevent cheating. But even then, vendors would get creative, hollowed stones, shaved metal, lead cores. One infamous baker was caught weighing bread with a sand-filled gourd. Innovation. A small child tugs at your sleeve and hands you a pebble. It's blessed, she says, then runs off. You now own a sacred rock. You try to look grateful. A cowbell rings from across the square. A priest gestures to it like he's announcing a miracle. It's just lunch. Still, the crowd pauses reverently. You step back from the relics, the bells, the burning candles, and the questionable cheese. You feel, oddly, lighter. A little holier. Or at least mildly sanitized. Then someone sneezes into a jar of incense. Time to keep moving. The scent of incense fades behind you, replaced by something sharper, onions, ale, mud, and a pinch of fresh drama. You're heading toward the noisiest part of the marketplace now, where business takes a back seat to opinion, scandal, and the art of yelling while holding a leak. This is the unofficial town square of the market, the crossroads where gossip blooms like mold on cheese and disputes unfold in front of anyone too polite, or too nosy, to look away. You arrive just in time. Two women are in a heated debate over the ownership of a chicken. The chicken in question stands between them, deeply unimpressed. One woman claims it lays blue eggs, the other insists hers only ever lay beige and this is not her bird. The chicken makes a noise that could be translated as not my problem. A small crowd has formed. Bets are being whispered. A man offers to hold the chicken for inspection and promptly gets pecked. You step around them and almost into another scene, a stout man with an unusually round head shouting that someone sold him a cabbage full of spiders. The seller, an old woman with 4 teeth and 0 shame, shrugs and says, "Protein's free." A boy yells, "That's what you get for pinching apples last week." The man sputters. The woman smirks. The cabbage lies and stayed on the cobblestones, its creepy tenants long escaped. As you try to pass, a voice rings out behind you, "I saw her pour well water into the beer." Gasp. Everyone turns. A brewer's apprentice turns pale. An old man mutters, "Sacrilege." The accused brewer crosses her arms and yells, "And your mead tastes like sock water, Edric." Now it's personal. What unfolds next is less a fight, more a brawl conducted in medieval slow motion, people shouting from 3 feet apart, wagging fingers, pointing at produce, occasionally pushing someone who's mostly trying to eat a plum. You duck just as a turnip flies past your ear. It lands with a splat near your foot. A goat immediately begins eating it. Everyone ignores the goat. Quirky fact, public disputes in medieval markets weren't just tolerated, they were expected. The market was the social hub, courtroom, theater, and sometimes, the boxing ring. Some towns even had official market criers just to report on the more colorful altercations. You imagine today's summary might read, 3 turnips thrown. 1 hat ruined. No clear winner. Just ahead, a woman in a bright yellow dress is loudly explaining her neighbor's entire marriage to a group of butchers. You learn more about someone named Mavis than you ever wanted to know. Someone shouts, "The pig was never yours, Elric." A pause. Then from the back of the crowd, "That pig chose me." The mood shifts. Voices rise. Elbows twitch. The pig is not present to clarify. You decide to step aside and find temporary shelter beside a barrel of pickled onions. A toothless man nods at you. "Bit lively today," he says. You nod back. He eats an onion whole like it's an apple. Further down the square, an impromptu trial seems to be happening. A child is being accused of stealing an egg. The judge is a baker holding a wooden spoon like a gavel. The child claims the egg fell into his pocket. His pockets do not have bottoms. A priest watching the scene looks as though he's reconsidering his entire career. A bystander murmurs, "We had 3 egg trials last week. 2 were hung, 1 escaped." You hope he's talking about eggs. You're not sure. Amid all this, you spot a familiar figure, the fishmonger from earlier, now defending his eel pies from accusations that they contain 0 eel. He lifts one and squints. "That's something fish," he insists. No one is convinced. A cat nearby offers to investigate. Suddenly, a quiet hush spreads. Someone important has arrived. The town crier. He wears an oversized tabard, rings a small handbell that sounds like it's in therapy, and unrolls a parchment that looks more chewed than written. He squints. Then declares, "Hear ye, hear ye. Edict from Lord Alfric the mildly bewildered. All goats must now be tethered. All cheese to be taxed, unless pre-approved by the vicar's cousin." The crowd groans. Someone yells, "What if my goat's independent?" The crier shrugs and yells louder. Also, this Friday, public flogging moved to noon. You take that as your cue to move on. As you leave the square, someone throws a beat. It hits a hat. The hat is worn by a man who was asleep. He wakes up screaming. You sigh contentedly. Marketplace justice has been served. You leave the shouting behind, though a lingering turnip thunk echoes in your memory, and enter a quieter patch of the marketplace. Here, the tone is more subdued, but the stakes arguably higher. You're now in the money section, scales, coins, clippers, and the quiet click of potential fraud. A table ahead displays various weights, some round, some square, some shaped like animals for reasons no one explains. A solemn merchant adjusts a tiny brass balance, setting one side with a silver coin and the other with what looks suspiciously like a pebble. He nods, satisfied. You suspect he's won a private bet against gravity. Next to him, a boy with ink-stained fingers and enormous pockets offers change. Lots of change. In obscure coins from obscure places, some so thin they look like metal lace, others so thick they resemble armor buttons. He tells you, "That's from Bruges. That one's Venetian. This one might be from the bottom of a well." You hand it back. Behind them, under a canopy patched with bits of old robes and optimistic banners, sits the town's official moneyer. He's hunched over a crude anvil, holding a disc of silver with a pair of tongs. He lifts a stamp, gives you a look like he's considering eternity, and brings the hammer down. Clink. A new coin is born, slightly crooked, somewhat dented, and ready for business. Or deception. You ask how he knows the weight is correct. He grins and points to his teeth. Lost 3 molars testing purity. You just know after a while. Historians still argue whether coins in small towns were regulated strictly or if every 5th one was creatively interpreted. Judging by the variety on this table alone, the answer is yes. Just beside him, a shady figure leans against a post, offering to clip your coins for free. You look down. In his hand is a tiny blade, a small pouch, and the confidence of someone who has never been caught. You politely decline. He shrugs and offers you a half-groat discount. Whatever that means. A child runs by yelling, "Fake pennies." He's got fake pennies. The man vanishes behind a tapestry faster than logic. You pass a table of scales. All slightly tilted. You adjust one. It groans. The seller says, "Authentic, that is." You suspect the tilt is part of the price. Quirky fact, coin clipping was a genuine problem in medieval times. People would shave tiny bits of silver or gold from the edges of coins, then melt the clippings down to sell separately. Some towns punished clippers with branding, finger removal, or forced recitations of royal tax law. Honestly, that last one sounds the worst. To your right, an elderly woman sorts through a pile of coins with fierce concentration. She sniffs one, bites another, holds a third up to the light. You ask what she's doing. "Finding the liar," she says. You do not interrupt her again. At another stall, a young apprentice demonstrates coin-striking for children. He lets them hammer pewter discs with a crude stamp of a smiley pig. A boy gets overexcited and hammers his thumb. The crowd winces. He doesn't cry, he roars with pride. The pig coin is slightly bent. He treasures it forever. Nearby, a self-proclaimed currency historian is giving an impromptu lecture. And then King Henry's mint master sneezed into the mold, and that's why all 1271 shillings have a bump shaped like a jelly bean, if you believe the old records. No one seems to, but they're listening anyway. You find a coin on the ground. A tiny one, bronze, with a hole in the middle. You pick it up. The nearest merchant gives you a thumbs up. Congratulations. That's worth half a crumb and a vague promise. You pocket it. Just in case. At the end of the row, a well-dressed man with ink on his cuffs offers reliable lending for short-term needs. His stall is lined with carefully scribed parchment contracts. He smiles too widely. You smile back and walk faster. Just as you're turning away, a woman behind you yells, "This coin's got two heads." The crowd roars with amusement. The merchant says, "Twice the luck," and pockets it quickly. You slip out of the money lane, a little richer in observation, slightly poorer in faith, and holding one coin that might be haunted. You decide to call it Trevor. Time to move on, before Trevor starts whispering financial advice. You walk away from the coin clippers and double-headed currency, leaving behind the soft chime of crooked scales and the faint scent of disappointment. Ahead, you spot a splash of color, deep reds, faded blues, blotchy greens, fluttering like wounded flags from a wooden cart. As you approach, you realize this isn't another merchant hawking food or fur or brass bells. This is the domain of the scribbler. A man with ink up to his elbows is hunched over a parchment scroll, muttering something about rhymes and rats. His cart is cluttered with rolled papers, broken quills, and what looks like a dried squid used as a bookmark. The air smells of old vellum, vinegar, and just a little bit of chicken. Literally. There's a chicken sitting on the inkpot. The scribbler glances up at you with the weary expression of someone who has rewritten the same love poem 37 times this week. "Need something penned?" he asks. Love note? Legal curse? Ode to your turnips? You ask what his most popular request is. He sighs. Apologies. Usually for things no one regrets. You ask about the chicken. That's Marjorie, he says. She edits. You nod slowly. Marjorie pecks at a quill. He offers you a selection of pre-written works, sorted by theme. Romantic, for when flowers are too expensive. Political, mostly metaphors about sheep. Religious, approved by 2 out of 4 bishops. Mildly rude, not fit for church, perfect for your brother-in-law. You pick up a scroll and unroll it. It begins. O fairest Beatrice, whose nose doth turn like a hesitant cartwheel. You stop there. Marjorie clucks disapprovingly. Across the way, a small stall offers writing services for hire. An apprentice scribe sits on a three-legged stool, furiously copying what appears to be the same poem, over and over. Father says we sell better if we spell love with extra ease, he mutters. Next to him, a bucket holds discarded drafts. You peek in. One is covered in corrections. Thy eyes are like frogs. No. Thy hair is like string. No. Thy hands remind me of small bread loaves. You respect the struggle. Historians still argue whether medieval poems were as clumsy as some preserved scraps suggest, or if the good ones simply didn't survive. Either way, this collection appears to be firmly in the rough draft category. A young woman walks up beside you and requests something tragic, but hopeful, but not about sheep. The scribbler frowns. That's 12 lines. 5 extra for hopeful. She agrees. Marjorie pecks approvingly. You notice several portraits for sale, really just sketchy doodles on stained parchment. One shows a knight with a comically long sword and very short legs. The caption reads, Sir Geoffrey the Overcompensated. It's 5 pennies. You consider buying it. Behind the scribbler's cart, a narrow board leans against a crate with the word complaints painted in thick letters. Dozens of little scrolls are tied to nails driven into the wood. You read a few. The baker's wife winked at me and I saw my future unravel. There are too many pigeons and not enough bread. This morning I woke up and my goat had rearranged my boots. You wonder if the board is for real grievances or just public therapy. Either way, it's working. Quirky fact, medieval towns often had complaint walls or public notice trees where villagers would post messages, requests, even anonymous poems. In one French village, a popular tree was burned by a nobleman after it published too many verses about his hairline. The scribbler returns to his parchment and begins a fresh piece. His quill scratches quickly, pausing only when Marjorie hops across the paper. He mutters a curse. She flaps indifferently. You ask him what he's writing. He says, something about shoes. Or love. Or both. You nod. That sounds about right. Just as you're about to leave, a sharp squawk erupts from the cart. Marjorie has stepped in the ink pot again. The scribbler sighs. That's the 3rd draft ruined this week. I should just let her write the next one. You walk on, clutching your tiny scroll of accidental verse, hearing the faint sound of the apprentice chanting rhymes behind you. And somewhere, in the shadows of the market stalls, Marjorie prepares her editorial debut. You continue weaving through the tangled aisles of the market, still holding your oddly poetic scroll, now slightly crumpled, and possibly smudged with chicken ink. Just ahead, the air takes on a dry, dusty texture, like parchment left too close to a hearth. There's fur in it. And feathers. And fleas. You've arrived at the furrier's stretch. It's quieter here, not the hush of reverence, but the deliberate calm of people trying not to scratch. Cloaks hang from beams like molten ghosts. Fox pelts dangle in pairs. A badger's face stares out from a table like it's asking whether you truly need another hood trim. One merchant steps forward, draped in mink, badger, and what looks suspiciously like someone's cat. Finest fur, he purrs. Keeps the cold out and the fleas confused. You nod slowly, eyeing the fur hat with ears. He lifts it up. Wolf cub, he says. Or something that owed a wolf money. You pass by a table covered in scraps, tails, trimmed sleeves, small squares of fur sewn into crude mittens and slippers. A woman is selling nose warmers made of rabbit. She demonstrates by tying one around her own. You smile politely. She does not. Nearby, 2 traders are locked in intense conversation over the price of a lynx pelt. One insists it's real lynx. The other says it smells too much like dog. They agree to let the town tanner decide, then promptly remember the tanner owes them both money. Just past them, a fur merchant is telling a group of noble-looking teenagers how he once skinned a bear with one hand and no regrets. His assistant, behind him, is mouthing, "It was a goat." A child offers you a tiny pouch of squirrel fur filled with lavender. "For dreams," she says. You ask what kind. She shrugs. "Depends on the squirrel." You buy it anyway. At another stall, a large cage holds a live fox, its expression halfway between smug and resigned. A sign reads, "For display only. Do not feed. Especially pieces of Lord Walter." You don't ask. Quirky fact, medieval Europe had complex sumptuary laws, limiting who could wear certain furs. Only the nobility could flaunt ermine, while merchants were restricted to squirrel or rabbit. This, of course, led to the creation of fake ermine, mostly by dyeing rats and hoping no one asked questions. You walk past a hanging row of cloaks, each furred at the collar. One is lined with goose feathers. Another boasts genuine bat velvet. A man tries to interest you in a muff made from martens that died peacefully. You are skeptical. A group of monks passes through, clutching their robes tightly. One glares at a furrier. Prideful, he mutters. The furrier smiles and offers him a sample collar. The monk flees. Behind you, someone sneezes. Loudly. A woman turns and screams, "You brought fleas to market." The man looks insulted. "They live here, Agnes." He yells. An impromptu inspection begins. People scratch preemptively. Children check their hoods. A merchant begins burning sage. A furrier sprinkles what looks like flour on her furs. "Just a preventative," she insists. "It smells like cloves and despair." A passing rat sniffs the air and bolts. You step out of the chaos and find yourself beside a table offering pest deterrents. The vendor, eyes wild, offers you a sachet of dried rosemary, a rabbit's skull dipped in vinegar, and a small vial labeled pure ferret essence. You decline. He nods, approvingly. You find a wooden bench and sit for a moment. There's a tiny puff of fur on it. Possibly decorative. Possibly a remnant of a fight. A woman beside you strokes a fox-trimmed glove and says, "My husband once gave me a cloak like this. Then lost it in a card game to a bishop." You nod solemnly. She adds, "The bishop looked great." You rise, brushing imaginary fleas from your sleeves. The fox in the cage makes eye contact again. You feel judged. Then you hear a hawker shouting something about love potions and emotional rebalancing. Time to move on. Quickly. You drift away from the furriers, mildly itchy and spiritually concerned. The air clears slightly, though there's still a suspicious feather floating near your collar. You swat it and press on, following the trail of odd smells and stranger promises. Ahead, a sign swings on a crooked wooden post, "Cures, charms, and comforts," and underneath in smaller lettering, "Results may vary." You've reached the apothecary stalls, where ancient knowledge and mild deceit go hand in hand, often in little glass bottles. Shelves groan under the weight of colored liquids, wax-sealed jars, corked vials, and paper packets tied with twine. The merchant, a lanky figure with 3 scarves and no eyebrows, grins like someone who's definitely added frog to something you're about to drink. "Looking for love?" he asks. You hesitate. He doesn't. 1 dose, 1 coin. Works instantly. Or slowly. Or never. Depends on the moon. You pick up a cloudy bottle labeled Essence of Desire, mild strength. The label is stained. The cork is slightly damp. You put it down. Just beside him, a woman with hair like an aggressive nest is mixing something into a steaming bowl. "For memory," she says, "though it smells like sadness and onions." You ask what's in it. "A little of everything. Mostly dill. Some regret." She offers you a sniff. Your nose goes on strike. You pretend to enjoy it. At the corner of her table sits a stack of tiny scrolls, verbal prescriptions. One reads: to be taken twice daily with mead. Avoid arguing with goats. You take one. For research. A teenage assistant is sorting sachets labeled for loneliness, for warts, and for forgetting regretful dances. She offers you a discount bundle. You decline, but she throws in a free sample of foot euphoria anyway. Across from them, another stall boasts tonics for men in bold, splattered ink. Underneath: vigor, valor, venison appetite. The vendor, a squat man with suspiciously red cheeks, holds up a bottle and declares, it once woke a man from a 3-day nap. You ask what happened next. He napped again. But with purpose. You move on. To the right, a shelf contains jars of dried herbs and ground minerals. Labels include: dragonroot, actually horseradish. Mermaid bark, probably kelp. Saint's tears, just salt. Windroot, no one knows. You ask the apothecary if these names are based in science. He smiles broadly. They're based in sales. Quirky fact: medieval apothecaries combined actual remedies with folklore and flair. Many sold genuine herbs like chamomile and comfrey alongside potions with bear gall, crushed beetle shells, and unicorn horn, aka narwhal tusk. One 14th century recipe called for boiling 9 lice in vinegar. You try not to think about that too long. A love potion display draws your eye, dozens of tiny bottles in pink, red, and deep purple. One reads immediate infatuation. Another simply says spouse enhancer. You glance at the price. You also notice a handwritten warning on the back. May cause excessive poetry. At the edge of the stall, a woman argues with the merchant. This made my husband too affectionate, she says. He built me a rock garden and sang to the goats. The apothecary beams. You're welcome. He doesn't have goats. Further down, a large cauldron bubbles with something green and fibrous. A young apprentice is stirring it while reading a book titled Healing or Harming. It's a spectrum. You peer inside. He says, we think it's soup now. You take his word for it. A monk stops beside you and asks for a balm for spiritual itching. The apothecary doesn't blink. Lavender and nettle. Rub nightly. Say sorry afterward. He nods gravely and buys 2 jars. You feel a tug on your sleeve. A child hands you a little pouch. It's for bad dreams, she whispers. And old ghosts. Mama says it works, but we keep waking up anyway. You hand her a coin and tuck the pouch into your pocket, unsure whether you feel comforted or cursed. As you turn to leave, the love potion seller calls after you. Just remember, sometimes the real magic is confidence and good lighting. You smile. Then someone nearby sneezes into a bottle labeled Truth Serum. He immediately begins confessing to 3 affairs and 1 unpaid debt. You take that as your cue to go. You exit the apothecary zone with your sanity mostly intact and your sleeves smelling faintly of nettle and misplaced passion. You drift toward the center of the marketplace again, where the mood shifts from mystical to tipsy. Ahead, a weather-beaten sign swings above a crooked tent, the Fox's flagon, stew, ale, and acceptable singing. Beneath it spills a loose collection of benches, half-barrels used as tables, and a haze of wood smoke, steam, and sheer indifference to hygiene. You found the market tavern. Or, more accurately, the semi-outdoor stew tent that pretends to be a tavern. You step inside, or at least into its open-sided perimeter. A woman with a ladle the size of a shovel is serving from a cauldron of bubbling, grayish-brown mystery. Stew's fresh, she says. Or alive. Either way, it moves. You glance into the pot. Something bobs to the surface, then sinks like it forgot its purpose. She slops a bowl full and hands it to a waiting customer, who sips it with the resigned air of someone who gave up on taste in 1347. You edge toward the bar, where a wooden plank rests between two barrels and passes for counter service. Behind it, a man with a florid nose and a glorious beard polishes mugs using what may have once been a sock. "What's your poison?" he asks cheerfully. You order mead. He pours from a jug labeled honeyish and hands it to you with a wink. It tastes like someone once described a bee to a bucket of water. But it's warm, and it's not tanner juice, so you keep drinking. Behind you, a table of traders sings a tune about a dancing mule and a wedding gone wrong. It rhymes. Barely. In the corner, a woman plays a lute with two broken strings. She strums anyway. Every third chord hits right. The rest are interpretive. At a side table, an intense debate rages over whether onions belong in stew. "I say yes," yells a man, holding up an entire onion. "It's not stew if you can identify the parts," counters another, waving a chunk of something possibly potato. Someone snorts into their cup and sprays a third man, who takes offense and stands up. His chair doesn't. He falls over. No one stops singing. You sit at a barrel table and observe. The stew tent isn't just for food. It's a refuge. A gossip hub. A confessional. A place to pretend you didn't just buy fake saffron and squirrel dreams. Next to you, two apprentices clink mugs and talk about their masters. One claims his blacksmith boss used to be a knight. The other says his cooper master once dated a queen. Both stories seem equally fabricated. They clink again anyway. Quirky fact: while official taverns were licensed and sometimes tightly regulated, informal ale tents like this one popped up wherever people gathered. Run by widows, guild wives, or anyone with a cauldron and confidence, these places offered warm drink, hotter rumors, and stew that may or may not include rat. Unintentionally. You sip your meat again. It's slightly better now. Or your standards are changing. From behind the tent, you hear a loud cluck, followed by a crashing sound. A duck runs through the stew tent, followed closely by a boy yelling that one owes me eggs. Everyone pauses. A few people clap. The stew woman doesn't even blink. "He'll be back," she says. A merchant slumps into the seat beside you, holding a mostly empty bottle and a meat pie that's attempting to escape its crust. "You ever think," he slurs, "that maybe geese are smarter than we are?" You say nothing. He nods solemnly and offers you a bite. You decline. Nearby, a poet is composing lines on a scrap of parchment, muttering, "What rhymes with pickle barrel shame?" A friar raises his mug and offers, "Fickle feral dame." The poet gasps. They toast. A new ballad is born. As the singing swells and someone drops a ladle, you notice the stew pot has begun to bubble with extra energy. Something belches from inside. The ladle woman stirs it vigorously and says, "It's thickening." "That's good, right?" No one answers. You decide it's time to move on. You rise from your barrel, leave 2 coins on the plank, and slip out into the cooling air of late afternoon. The mead clings to your breath, the stew to your soul, and somewhere behind you, the duck is plotting its return. You press forward. The market isn't done with you yet. You emerge from the tavern haze, slightly warm, moderately confused, and carrying the aftertaste of meat-flavored steam. The marketplace has shifted again, fewer smells now, less stew and sweat, more mischief in the air. You've entered the wandering edge of the square, where the rules are looser, the goods more mysterious, and the crime just a little bit charming. You feel a tug. You glance down. Your pouch is missing. You spin, too late, and hear a clatter. A boy has tripped over a chicken and landed flat on his back. Your pouch flies through the air in a graceful arc and lands, miraculously, inside a pie stall. A woman behind the table raises an eyebrow, picks up your pouch, then your pie, and says, "Well, That's a new recipe. The boy gets up sheepishly. Sorry, he mumbles. He's no more than 10, face smeared with jam, or possibly strategy. A small crowd has started watching with the unhelpful glee of people who want something exciting but not too exciting. You step toward your pouch. A nun arrives. She moves faster than logic. With the holy fury of someone who's seen too many pickpocket relics in her time, she marches forward and, smack, hits the boy squarely across the back of the head with a rolled-up scroll. The scroll unrolls mid-swat, revealing what appears to be a psalm about honesty. The crowd gasps. Then claps. The nun tucks the scroll back into her belt, lifts your pouch, dusts it off, and hands it to you with a nod that feels like a sermon. You say, "Thank you." She says, "God sees everything." Then she vanishes. The boy, now seated on a pile of cabbage, shrugs. Was worth a shot. You toss him a small coin anyway. He grins. Somewhere, the nun tenses. You glance around. The pie seller is offering samples of her latest creation, apple, sage, and confusion. You accept a slice. It tastes like regret and second chances. Quirky fact, pickpocketing was so common in medieval towns that some vendors hung iron cages with fake severed hands as a warning. Others hired stall boys whose only job was to scream thief at random intervals to spook amateurs. Statistically, it worked half the time, and caused pie-related accidents the other half. You wander toward the next cluster of stalls, still chewing thoughtfully. There's a man juggling coins while reciting a parable about geese and taxes. He drops one coin into a jug. A woman behind him shouts, "You owe me 3 of those." You walk past a small stage where a puppet show is beginning, 2 cloth figures reenacting the tale of Saint Crispin and the mysterious sausage. Children laugh. One adult sobs quietly. To your left, a merchant is selling punishment pies, dense, crust-heavy monsters meant to settle arguments or dent foreheads. A couple beside you is buying 2. You ask the merchant if people actually eat them. He winks. Eventually. A banner nearby reads Tales Told, Secrets Sold, a storytelling stall where people pay to hear fabricated gossip about themselves. You listen in. You, good sir, once saved a bishop's cat from a well, and in return he blessed your ankles. You've had lucky boots ever since. The customer claps with glee. You're almost tempted to try it. At the far end, a lanky performer is doing hat tricks while standing on a barrel. He's spinning 3 hats, one of which clearly belongs to someone in the crowd, judging by the shouting. A small girl throws a turnip. It hits. The crowd cheers. Suddenly, someone nearby yells, "Free tarts for the next 5 minutes." Chaos erupts. A baker screams. The tarts vanish. You slip away during the confusion, pouch secured tightly, heart still slightly warmed by the nun's vigilante justice. Just as you round the corner, a familiar voice calls out, "Want to buy that pie back?" You turn. The same boy from earlier. You grin. Already ate it. He looks mildly offended. Should have haggled. You walk away, the last sliver of market daylight stretching ahead, and the faint aroma of sage and sermon in your wake. Evening drapes itself across the marketplace like a velvet cloak left out in the rain. The noises dull into a background hum, less shouting, more murmuring. Carts creak as they're packed. Dogs yawn. Somewhere, a rooster crows entirely out of context. You walk slowly now, full of stew, stories, and something you suspect might be early onset flea possession. The stalls are closing. Torches flicker in iron brackets, casting long shadows over the cobbles. The sky above is deep blue, fading to soot at the edges. You can hear your own footsteps. You pass the bread stall, the baker woman is wiping flour off a bench with a sigh. 2 loaves left, she mutters. One has a bite in it. The other has a footprint. She sells both anyway. Nearby, the blacksmiths are covering their forges. The young woman gives a long stretch and throws a final glare at her rival. He responds by whistling off-key and pretending his hammer is a mandolin. The tension softens. They nod. Truce, for now. The bear is gone. The barrel it sat on is empty, steam still curling off the top. You pause. The bear's handler left a sign, "Thank you for tolerating Bernard." He tolerates you, too. You pass the coin merchant, now counting something in his lap under torchlight. He gives you a suspicious look, then a slow nod, as if he remembers you, but isn't sure whether to rob or respect you. You nod back. He chooses neither. The scribbler's cart is closed, but pinned to the side is a note. Today I wrote 7 poems, 1 confession, 2 marriage threats, and something that accidentally summoned a goat. Tomorrow's list is full. Marjorie's feather rests beside it, dipped in fresh ink. You pass the herb wife, now dousing her coals. She sees you and tosses something small into your hands. A waxed pouch. For sleeping, she says. Or remembering. You don't ask which. You just nod. Quirky final fact, many medieval marketplaces had no walls, no gates, only the memory of sound and stories lingering in the stones. Even when empty, the square was never silent. Gossip lingered longer than banners. And if you walked alone at night, some swore the booths whispered. You reach the edge of the square, where stalls melt into alleyways and torchlight flickers uncertainly. The last merchant, an old man with shoes that have seen at least 3 plagues, is packing up a small cart. He stops to hand you a crust of something unidentifiable. "End of day special," he says. "Free with stories." You take it. It crunches like truth. Or gravel. The cobbles beneath your feet are warm from the day's feet, the walls radiate old sun, and above you, a single lantern sways gently from a rope, casting light like a blessing. Dogs curl into doorways. Someone laughs softly in the dark. You exhale. The day is done. You slow your steps now. The night folds itself around you like a worn wool cloak, scratchy in places, but familiar. The wind sighs through alleyways, rattles shutters, nudges doors. Above, the stars begin to press through the sky like distant pinpricks in a painted ceiling. The market is gone. Packed. Shuttered. Only traces remain, the scent of smoke on your clothes, a smudge of saffron on your sleeve, the quiet creak of a cart far off, the faint echo of laughter you're not sure was ever real. You walk past empty stalls, their ropes swinging gently, like they too are resting after a long day of noise and negotiation. A candle burns low in a window. A goose mutters in its sleep. Somewhere, a bell chimes, not to announce anything, just to say yes, time is still passing. And you? You've seen it all today. You've walked among the honest and the sly, eaten stew and possibly soup, smelled 50 types of regret, and bought a poem edited by a chicken. You've survived pickpockets, market fights, prophetic turnups, and one morally flexible nun. You carry with you a pouch of mystery herbs, a fake coin named Trevor, and the memory of a bear who judged you. But now you walk slower. Your feet feel the stone beneath them, and your breath steadies into silence. Your thoughts don't chase anymore. They drift. And as the last torch gutters out, as the sky deepens to ink, you find yourself at your door, somehow, no memory of arriving. The latch gives. The hinges creak. The room welcomes you. You lie down. Let the weight of the day drop. Let the market fall away. Let it all blur into the warm hush of forgetting. Sleep, now. You've earned it.